Picture Regency-era England, but the British. Countryside is no longer merely gossip and garden parties. Since a mysterious plague swept the land decades earlier, the dead rise and social graces share the stage with saber slashes. Walled cities, makeshift fortresses, and martial arts academies dot the map. Any well-bred family now sends its daughters abroad to master lethal combat, just as they once sent sons to finishing school. In the 19th century, England proudly expands its empire, importing silks, teas, and a zombie plague that absolutely nobody ordered. The Bennet family, consisting of 5 sisters, Elizabeth, Jane, Lydia, Kitty, and Mary, are not your typical debutantes. Under the guidance of their father, Mr. Bennet, they've all been sent to China, where they trained in martial arts and weapons, combat to defend themselves against the relentless undead. While they're busy honing their deadly skills, their mother, Mrs. Bennet, remains fixated on one goal: getting her daughters married off to wealthy suitors, because clearly that's the safest future. Within weeks, the green and pleasant land becomes a buffet of brain-hungry revenants, so the upper crust swaps embroidery lessons for Shaolin drills. Parliament commissions a 100-foot rampart around London, then digs a royal canal so deep you could lose a regiment of redcoats in it. The weed-choked strip between wall and water earns the cheery nickname the In-Between, because nothing bad ever happens in places called that, right? During the Second Battle of Kent, one bridge is overrun. Villagers are devoured, and His Majesty goes barking mad, leaving only a single crossing intact. The countryside soon resembles a real estate brochure for fortified manors. Enter Colonel Fitzwilliam Darcy, pride in his boots and carrion flies in his pocket. He strides into the Featherstone estate after submitting to the standard protocol of strip search. Tunnel crawl, and please cough if you are undead. Mrs. Featherstone swears her drawing room is zombie-free. But Darcy cracks a glass vial and releases his insects. The flies would know, he mutters. They promptly circle a jittery card player, so Darcy snaps the stem of his wineglass and skewers the poor fellow's cheek, finishing with a brisk decapitation. Heads literally roll across the Aubusson carpet. When Featherstone insists no one else is infected, Darcy punts the severed noggin toward the fireplace like the world's worst croquet ball and stalks out. Upstairs, the niece has already turned, munching staff and then Featherstone's shrieking daughter. Moral of the story: never lie to a man who travels with pests. Meanwhile, at Longbourn, Mr. Bennet secretly loves that his 5 daughters can reload muskets faster than most militia. But Mrs. Bennet prefers wedding bells to battle cries. The Bennets attend a country dance, where they're introduced to some intriguing newcomers. Colonel Darcy, a man of few words, but a deadly reputation as a trained zombie killer, arrives with his good-natured friend, Charles Bingley, and Bingley's snooty sister, Caroline. Bingley, with his charm and fortune of 100,000, or 8.2 million in today's terms, instantly falls for Jane, whose kindness and beauty captivate him. Mrs. Bennet, upon hearing of Bingley's wealth, starts plotting her daughter's future, seeing nothing but dollar signs. Meanwhile, Darcy, who owns property paying him $10,000 annually, about $820,000 today, remains stoic and aloof. Darcy surveys the room and mutters the immortal burn. She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. Lizzie catches every syllable, knocks over a perfume bottle, and flees, cheeks blazing. Her humiliation is cut short by the entrance of Mrs. Featherstone, now grey-veined and politely rotten. Before she can utter a cryptic warning, Darcy coldly fires a headshot. A bell clangs the zombie alarm. Guests squeal and scatter while the Bennet sisters unsheathe stilettos concealed in corset stays. The ballroom becomes a ribbon and lace slaughterhouse. Lizzie executes a spinning heel kick that sends one cadaver sailing into the harpsichord. And somewhere in the mayhem, Darcy's frosty opinion of her thaws a degree. Back at Longbourn, Jane cannot stop replaying Bingley's smile while Elizabeth shadowboxes, ranting that Darcy's pride is bigger than Yorkshire. The next morning, Bingley invites Jane to tea. Mrs. Bennet suggests horseback. If skies open, a damp damsel might be invited to stay overnight. Sure enough, a drizzle and a lone zombie spook the horse. Jane's musket misfires, burning her hand, but she still slices the ghoul into neat pâté. Netherfield's servants later find her feverish and drenched, prompting Darcy to summon his flies again. They ignore Jane, so Elizabeth crushes them in her fist with a snarky, "Your insects seem out of sorts, sir." Darcy files the remark under reasons: "This woman bothers me and yet intrigues me." During Jane's convalescence, Elizabeth spies Darcy practicing sword forms at dawn, shirt billowing Byron style. He catches her gaze and murmurs, "You would be well advised, Miss Bennet, to stay out of my way." But the slight quirk at the corner of his mouth says otherwise. When the rest of the Bennets arrive to collect Jane, Darcy warns Bingley that country girls may be after fortunes rather than hearts. Elizabeth overhears only enough to sharpen her disdain. Mrs. Bennet still secures a promise of a grand ball, because nothing defeats a plague like dancing. Enter Mr. William Collins, a clergyman with the subtlety of a trumpet. Sometime later, Mr. Bennet introduces his family to cousin Collins, who will get the estate when Bennet passes because women can't be heirs. Over boiled mutton, he praises Lady Catherine de Bourgh, legendary one-eyed zombie slayer, and announces his intention to marry whichever Bennet's sister is convenient. Upon hearing Jane is probably spoken for, he swivels to Elizabeth, praising her lesser Chinese style. In the afternoon, Collins and the sisters leave to visit their aunt, but they stop by the road when they find a fallen carriage with a woman screaming for help. The sisters get their weapons ready, and when the woman comes out, they open fire because she's a zombie. Jane finishes her by kicking her down the hill. As the journey continues, Elizabeth struggles to carry all the weaponry, but Collins only puts it back in her arms instead of helping her. When they arrive in town, they notice the new soldiers who will protect this area. Elizabeth meets Lieutenant Wickham, and they immediately hit it off. Darcy is riding nearby and gets jealous when he sees them, so he leaves without a word. Wickham tells Elizabeth that he and Darcy aren't on good terms because of some family issues over money. That night, everyone attends the ball, and Jane spends time with Bingley. Elizabeth tries to chat with Wickham, but Collins drags her into dancing while showing lots of energy and enthusiasm. Collins rubs balm into the wound by dancing with her anyway at Bingley's ball, flailing like a drunken semaphore. Next, Darcy asks to dance with her too, but Collins makes the moment awkward and causes them to walk away. On his way out, Darcy overhears Mrs. Bennet talking about Jane's future with Bingley and keeps emphasizing his money. Meanwhile, Elizabeth bumps into Bingley and they hear a noise. When they turn around, they see a servant being attacked by a zombie. The duo gets some axes and follows them downstairs, however. The zombie grabs Bingley and makes him fall. Elizabeth immediately slides down and knocks the zombie down before checking on her friend. But when she looks up, she discovers all the zombie orphans hiding down there. She asks them how they sneaked in, and a kid says that their new friend showed them the way in. Darcy arrives in time to flambe one in the bread oven, but Lizzie scolds him. "You are an excellent fighter and a dreadful companion." Jane soon receives a letter. Bingley has fled to London under Darcy's counsel. Heartbreak times 2. Collins proposes to Elizabeth the following morning, promising a life free of gore and swords. She declines again, and this time practices Wing Chun on a fence post until splinters fly. In the woods, she meets Lieutenant George Wickham, handsome in crimson uniform and bitterness. He whispers that Darcy cheated him of inheritance and introduces her to St. Lazarus Church, where infected congregants nibble pig brains to stay civilized. "Imagine no more war," Wickham says. Elizabeth admits the idea has merit, plus, and points out they should take the idea to the crown. However, Wickham explains the war almost bankrupted the country, so he has nobody to go to for help. Sometime later, a friend of Elizabeth's tells her she's engaged to Collins and asks her to come as her chaperone to meet the in-laws. Weeks later, Elizabeth visits Collins and his new fiancée Charlotte. At Collins' estate, Elizabeth is amused by a picture showing Catherine killing Lucifer. There's also a painting of the 4 horsemen of the zombie apocalypse, who are said to appear when the end is near. Elizabeth realizes they're the men she saw in the woods. Then she finally gets to meet Catherine and her daughter. Elizabeth is shocked to see Darcy is there too and learns he's Catherine's nephew. Soon Wickham also arrives because Elizabeth invited him so he could ask for the money he needs for his plan. Catherine thinks that the idea of befriending zombies is ridiculous and they would never listen to a leader. But Collins points out that the Bible says the Antichrist will lead the undead. Darcy supports Catherine's opinion and gets angry when Wickham mentions his father, so he makes the guards kick him out. Elizabeth tells Darcy that he's as unfeeling as the undead. That night, Darcy spends lots of time outside training to deal with his anger. Elizabeth can't sleep because her friend snores and goes for a walk in the gardens where she finds Wickham. He's come to tell her that Darcy made the Bingley family leave by telling them that Jane is only after their money. Wickham also asks Elizabeth to run away together, but she turns him down. Before leaving, Wickham reminds her that the day of reckoning is coming. The next day, Darcy tells Elizabeth that he considers her inferior, but he's still attracted to her, so he asks her to marry him. Elizabeth turns him down and calls him out for what he did to Jane and Bingley, only for Darcy to defend his meddling. A furious Elizabeth kicks him and throws a bunch of objects at him before attacking him with a poker. He quickly defends himself and they end up in a compromising position on the table. Their argument turns into a full fight, and they exchange a bunch of blows before they end up in another awkward position. When Elizabeth says she'll never marry him, Darcy finally leaves and she ends up having a breakdown. Later, Elizabeth receives a letter from Darcy explaining himself. He says he didn't intend to hurt Jane, he only sent Bingley away to protect him from Mrs. Bennet. He also explains that he had to kill his own father when he became a zombie, but he still gave Wickham the money that was promised to him. However, Wickham kept coming back for more and got offended because Darcy wouldn't pay. Then Wickham tried to marry Darcy's teenage sister for the money, but Darcy saved her just in time. Lastly, Darcy informs Elizabeth that he respects her feelings for him. So to forget about his heartbreak, he's gone to London to fight against the latest zombie attack. He thinks someone is leading the zombies because the attacks were too organized. When Elizabeth returns home, she's horrified to learn that Wickham has run away with Lydia, the youngest sister. She guesses that he must have taken her to the zombie church. That night, Elizabeth is visited by Catherine, who announces Darcy will marry her daughter if Elizabeth doesn't marry him first. Elizabeth is seeing Darcy in better eyes nowadays, but she's still unsure about a relationship. So Catherine challenges her to a duel against her guard. The man is big and strong, so he throws quite dangerous punches and easily blocks Elizabeth's attacks. She refuses to give up even when he chokes her and slashes his face before breaking his arm. With an excellent kick, she throws him against a beam that breaks and causes part of the ceiling to drop on him. Catherine corners Elizabeth with her swords, but admits she respects her resolve. At that moment, Mr. Bennet enters the room to forbid Elizabeth from rescuing her sister because it's too dangerous. Jane volunteers to help, but Elizabeth doesn't want her to come because she wants her to protect the family. Catherine then offers to take care of the Bennets in her estate so Jane and Elizabeth can leave. When the duo reaches the bridge, the soldiers block them and inform them they've set up lots of explosives. The bridge will be blown up tomorrow at dawn to stop the zombie horde in London from invading the rest of the country. The sisters ignore them and continue to move forward. Meanwhile, Bingley is on the battlefield and throws a bomb at the zombies trapped in a trench. But when he's about to leave, a creature grabs him by his scarf. Luckily, Jane arrives just in time to cut the scarf and push him away from the explosion. Nearby, Darcy kills another zombie with his sword, only to find a bunch of undead hands reaching up from the ground. A huge zombie is about to attack him from behind. However, Elizabeth kills it first with an axe. She explains they're standing on a zombie graveyard, so they start stabbing the ground to kill the awakening bodies. Afterward, Elizabeth tells him about her sister being at the church, and Darcy has to inform her that the building was burned down 5 days ago, so her sister is probably dead. When Darcy leaves, it's revealed he was lying. He told Elizabeth that the church was down to keep her away from danger, but the building is actually fine. He sneaks around the church and sees the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse guiding a horde of zombies. Meanwhile, Elizabeth notices Bingley. He keeps looking at the road that goes to the church and not at the bridge where he's supposed to oversee the detonation. This makes her realize that Darcy lied, and she immediately leaves on her horse. In the military camp, a man discovers that someone has stolen all the brains from the dead soldiers. Back to Darcy, he enters the church through a back door and finds Lydia chained up. On a wall, he discovers Wickham's plans to attack London with the zombies. At that moment, Wickham shows up and Darcy offers him money in exchange for Lydia, but Wickham turns it down and opens fire. The bullet hits a gate, and the noise alerts the horde, who immediately burst into the room. It turns out Darcy fed them the soldier brains to make them violent, while Wickham tries to defend himself. Darcy breaks the chain to rescue Lydia. At the same time, his horse pulls the bars from the window so his master can escape. Once outside, Darcy puts Lydia on his horse and sends her to the bridge. Then he brings down a couple of zombies before he's confronted by Wickham, so a sword duel ensues while the zombies run out of the church. In the distance, Elizabeth continues to ride and stares at London burning in horror.
My God.
At that moment, she sees Lydia and calls her name, but she isn't heard. The zombie horde appears behind her, and Elizabeth takes out her sword to cross it. Lydia makes it to the bridge right before they start getting ready for detonation. Back at the church, the men continue to fight, and Darcy manages to stab his opponent. However, Wickham is fine because he's been undead all along and has repressed his urge for brains. Thanks to his hate for Darcy, Wickham explains the 4 horsemen have risen from hell and he's the Antichrist that will lead them. He starts choking Darcy and gets ready to decapitate him, only for Elizabeth to stop him by cutting off his arm and trampling him with her horse. Afterward, the couple rides away on Elizabeth's horse while the zombie horde chases after them. They make it to the bridge right as the soldiers activate the bombs, and the sisters think Elizabeth is getting killed by the resulting explosions. However, when the smoke clears, Elizabeth is crawling on the rubble. She finds Darcy's unconscious body near her and cries as she kisses him and says she loves him. A few days later, Bingley asks Jane to marry him, and she obviously says yes. Darcy wakes up from his coma and tells Elizabeth he heard her on the bridge. He proposes to her and she says yes before they kiss. The couples get married together and Collins officiates. Everyone is happy until they see Wickham approach with a zombie horde. Cut to black, leave the audience craving the sequel along with a stiff cup of tea. The movie Pride and Prejudice and Zombies masterfully blends Jane Austen's timeless themes of love, pride and societal expectations with the thrilling and chaotic backdrop of a zombie apocalypse. At its core, the film explores the tension between duty and desire as the Bennet sisters struggle to balance their roles as women in a society obsessed with marriage and wealth, while also embracing their agency and strength as trained warriors. Through this, it highlights the importance of challenging traditional norms, especially when those norms threaten individual freedom and well-being. A key theme in the movie is the complexity of human nature, as exemplified by Colonel Darcy and George Wickham. Darcy's initial coldness is a defense mechanism shaped by his pride, yet he ultimately proves that true strength lies in humility and selflessness. Meanwhile, Wickham's deceptive charm reveals that appearances can be misleading, and not everything is as it seems. The contrast between these two characters underscores the lesson that first impressions can often be deceiving, and true character is revealed through actions, not words. Another central theme is the importance of personal integrity and standing up for what one believes in, as demonstrated by Elizabeth Bennet. Throughout the film, she refuses to conform to societal expectations and fights for her independence, both in battle and in love. Her journey teaches viewers that it's essential to stay true to one's values, even when faced with overwhelming external pressures. At its heart, the movie also underscores the transformative power of love. Despite the chaos and violence that surrounds them, the relationships between the Bennet sisters and their suitors evolve beyond mere attraction or convenience. The love stories in Pride and Prejudice and Zombies remind us that love should be based on mutual respect, understanding, and personal growth, rather than superficial qualities such as wealth or status. In conclusion, the film blends action and romance to teach valuable lessons about love, honor, and the importance of challenging societal norms. It reminds us that in a world filled with chaos and uncertainty, the most important thing is to stay true to who you are and fight for what you believe in, no matter how unlikely or unconventional that path may be.